Hi there, hello, it's me, I'm back. From watching the entirety of Apo's POV because I was like, man, it was kind of sad and like depressing. I should really look into that. And I'm fresh off of watching the 2 hours and 47 minutes while pausing to take notes. Suffices to say, it's been like 4 hours that I've been working on this, so probably gonna be on the longer side. But effectively what I've done is taken notes on Apo's entire POV, and it is sad. Oh dear, I was almost brought to tears. Depression. It's so sad. But so good. So you're gonna hear about it. We're gonna sit and we're gonna talk. And essentially, what's the sitch is I'm gonna kind of go over the POV through all the episodes and highlight points of Apo's character and interesting things that happen. And generally, it's sort of like a recap, but more character focused. So. There's stuff. Oh, there's so. But yeah, for reference, I also was incredibly biased before, I think, going into this. I was also sort of, this wasn't the first time, but I was very much a pro-vampire viewer, okay? I feel like I'm like admitting to be like racist a little bit, but like I was a very pro-vampire person, and then now I don't know anymore. I'm in pain. It's okay. It's fine. Apo, my sweet baby girl. Oh. Anyways. Yeah, so I was definitely pro-vampire, and just seeing Apo like fully break down and give up was genuinely painful. I was throwing down the crying emoji in my notes so many times. Pure pain. But yeah, so let's get into it. Episode 1, I would assume that you guys generally know military. Yeah, not really excited to be here. I will also be pointing out some of their funny lines that they've said. Apo asks Avid if he ate the mushrooms on his way over here, which I think is hilarious. And also is constantly saying, why are the people insane? Which I also think is hilarious. But yeah, during the first episode, Apo's just trying to find the people who aren't crazy. And one interesting thing that happens is Apo catches Martyn pretending to be rich and clocks that he might look it, but he doesn't talk like it. And I think that was really interesting. So, because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know exactly what the details are, but I'm fairly certain it's been confirmed that Martyn is at least lying a little bit when he talks about being rich in a certain way. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I thought that was really interesting to notice that Apo noticed pretty fast. It was pretty quick. And another thing that's established very quickly is that, like, Apo can fight. Like, she can do it. She may not like it, but she can do it. But, yeah. Ugh. And one of the things she says is she comments about having to babysit a bunch of civilians, which is, notice the use of the word having. She says, I didn't think I was gonna have to babysit a bunch of civilians. Technically, she does it. Apo, it feels very responsible for the members of town. And that is very apparent throughout her entire POV. She's like, I must protect Mama Bear. Yeah. One other thing that Apo does is Apo gives people nicknames. At one point during the first episode, Apo like takes Martyn's like book and like there's a whole thing. She gives it back, whatever. But like at one point she's like, tell the child I'm sorry. She gives the book back later, but like in in this interaction, she says, "Rich boy, come here." And then she says one of the other great lines. I was gonna give it back, but you just cursed my family bloodline and ran away. Hilarious. Comedy. Gives it back or whatever, and is one of the things that she says is, do you not know what a joke is? And it is weirdly clear that Martyn does not as familiar with that, and it's like a little sad for a minute, but that was interesting. One thing that also happens is she hits Shelby with like a wooden stake. I don't know if it was like exactly on accident or just like, hey look, I made a stake. And says, sorry, I'm not evil, probably. And I'm like, which I thought was interesting. That was a fun amount of uncertainty from her. I was like, okay. Yeah, but Apo and Pyro are roommates, if you weren't aware. This will be relevant later. And then, yeah, there's just a lot of general stuff that happens. Truffle, the pig. One of the things that also happens is Apo picks up the webs and like the string for like bows from like the crypts and stuff, which I don't think anyone else talks about that, which is, you know, the military is showing kind of thing. Back in town, one thing that is important to note, I did not realize how much information Apo had. Like, Apo was like this close to like being on the nose before we really got like proper confirmation. So close. There were the pieces were all there. Well, we'll get into it. I'm gonna do a little section for like info. Apo knew about the red beacon in episode 1. Yeah. Anyways, and then one other thing that happens is that Avid tries to get together like a search party when they're freaking out about Shelby being gone and accusing Scott of stuff. And in this moment, when Avid is trying to get people together to look for Shelby, Apo is the only person who agrees. Shelby shows up right afterwards, but in that moment of desperation, no one is willing to step up at that point except for her. Like, obviously Avid, but he's, you know, beautiful. This is also going to come up later more relevantly. The self-sacrifice. Oh dear. My sweet baby girl. Okay. Yeah. She doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to do military service. She picked here because we were just going to be quiet. She's kind of pissed that it's mandatory. And she can't wait to go home. And that's going to be even more sad later. One thing that's also interesting throughout like the first couple episodes, Apo refuses to believe in anything that's like spiritual. Like, she's very sus of the beacons and the books and like, I I don't know about this holy whatever you're talking about. Like, Apo hears about the special powers from Sausage and Cleo, and she's like, so you swallowed a bell, and something, I don't remember what she said to combat Cleo's power or whatever, but it was a very rational thing. And then another thing that's really interesting that happens in the first episode is Apo says that she trusts Avid, but that he's just afraid, which is one of the most true statements of all time. Like, because they're talking in the crypt, they're waiting for like a book to respawn or whatever at this point, and by they I mean Cleo, Martyn, Sausage, and then Apo. They're sitting in the crypt, or like one of the book spawn areas, and they're talking about people, and Apo and then Avid comes up, and Apo is like a little bit kind of defending Avid in this moment. And so like the trust in Avid's character is very established quite quickly, actually, which I think is I don't know, it feels representative of her to have picked out his character amongst the madness and the mess. I don't want to say good judge of character, because it's true, but also it's not. I'm gonna say it. I would say she's not perfect, but I don't know if you would give anyone else a better score in this category. Argue in the comments. But yeah, then we're into episode 2. And we learned that her person's name is Cherry, which I believe is another content creator. I'm not familiar. Anyone else who wants to info dump in the comments, feel free. Maybe don't do too much, but maybe just a little bit. But we learned that something happened in Fernsfield, and she says she couldn't bear to be responsible for more lives. And then immediately followed up with like, shoot, there are 13 people here. Calls everyone in the town crazy. Compliments Sausage gay romance novels about the rumors. And this is all in her letter to Cherry, and it's super sweet. Or Sherry, I think it's Sherry, or Cherry. It close enough. You know what I mean. And then they kind of mess about in the crypt a little bit, but then there's another great line. I'm not a murderer. He stabbed me first. But yeah, and then there's this very sweet roommate bonding moment between Apo and Pyro when they're talking about the house judging contest, and they turn to each other and they're like, we're so screwed, in reference to like the house judging, which I think is really cute, and it was just like, aw, bonding, friendship. But let me run it back a little bit to something. When I'm not exactly sure if Apo is I think Apo is generally like doesn't cuss and stuff, but like her cuss is shoot. Like, this will come up. That's her cuss equivalent. Yeah. Just, you have a cuss equivalent if you don't swear. Mine's crap. And I do swear, like, occasionally, but mine's crap. I'm sure if you hadn't noticed, it wouldn't be that hard for you to figure it out. But yeah, so that is good to know, because when I'm writing down quotes of what she said, when you hear shoot, it's important. During the house judging situation, Apo steps in to stop Cleo from like killing Avid. Like I don't think Cleo would have like actually killed Avid, but it is important to note that Apo does step in to save Avid or like break up the fight. And then there's been some like suspicion going around at this point that maybe Avid wrote the books. And Apo straight up like asks if Avid wrote the books in the crypts, and the clocks that Avid is confused and doesn't necessarily know what she's talking about. And I thought that was really interesting that it was a good read, and the information gathering is quite good. But something else that happens pretty soon after that is Apo covers for Martyn using Holy Word, the like little like spray thing, and calls it "someone's throwing a bunch of flour. What a weirdo!" And it's really interesting to see how much like not necessarily lies, but like how much that Apo is choosing to withhold information. I feel like if she was a superhero, it would be one of those, like, I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you kind of things, where you're kind of pissed at them, but you sort of get it, but you're still kind of pissed at them for not telling you. It was for your own good. She's one of those. You know the phrase. I don't think she has outright said it yet, but that is essentially the phrase. That is a lot of what Apo is doing. Apo also makes an attempt to hide the information about like the Holy Word book from Abolish when he like walked over. And then they go into like a big group to go for like beacons. And it's important to note that I don't know if Apo really picked someone per se, but ends up being like walking buddies with Owen. And during this little quest, they find one of the books, and Apo within another iconic line, "I think I ate mold." Hilarious. I personally, the delivery sells it for me. It's fabulous. The book power seems to like freak Apo out like a little bit because of like the whole not moving and such. But anyways, moving on in the like group thing, Avid runs off. So Apo runs off after him, switching with Owen and I think like Ren or whatever, because you know, Owen was the walking buddy, to go and find him. Apo's sense of responsibility pulls her to chase off after Avid, willingly, but very annoyed. Like, Apo gives off the energy of kind of like, I don't want to say Wolverine, but like someone who's like really grumpy, but like super good and nice, and they're just kind of like, I'm just too nice and too good to not help and be a good person. And it's just like, anyways, Apo is fully like saying she feels like it'll be her fault if anyone dies. She proceeds to punch Avid, calls him stupid for running off, and to get himself together and try and keep the crazy to himself. And both of them sort of affirm to each other that they have the same, like, I don't want to say vice, but like, he also has the self-sacrificing, like both of them say, I'd feel super responsible if something happened to anyone. They do not care about themselves as much. They really would just like town to be okay. But it's sort of fun that they sort of like fight over it a little bit, and he's like, well, I just wanted everyone to be okay, and she's like, well, I just wanted everyone to be okay, and Apo sort of wins the argument of like, well, you can't die either because I would feel responsible for you getting hurt. And it's just like a little sweet, but like she's kind of pissed. And one other thing that happens is Apo like bumps into Scott in town and is sort of like, well, to quote her, you know, he has like problems, right? And she's saying to Scott about Avid, and then follows it up with like, maybe don't like make it worse, which I think is kind of sweet. But also like it's also social management. I can tell that like Apo is trying to like make people feel, I don't know, safe, not safe, but like at least a little bit better. Like she has a very good sense of what public sentiment is and wants to try and make sure that it's not panic, which is kind of important, but also interesting to see what she chooses to withhold. More on that later. But, you know, Scott kind of is like, well, you know, don't accuse me of murder. And then Apo was like, yeah, they kind of accused me of murder today as well. And that's something that's interesting. I don't think I have really seen Apo not empathize with someone. In almost every single interaction with Apo, she's find something to agree with them about, or to like find common ground of some kind. In almost every single interaction, there is a certain amount of like empathizing and like compromising and finding like something that they agree on, which is like that's impressive. But also like finding something to agree on. Which it's sort of like gives like peacemaker energy. You're just like, hey, let's all get along, please. Kind of like older sibling energy sometimes. So if you had an older sibling that was like good about like, you know, older sibling in a like a nurturing / chill way, that kind of energy. But yeah, in this conversation, it is followed up with like Apo trying to like figure out what Scott's deal is, and something interesting that happens is like she backs away a little bit and like like goes to use like her ability for a little bit. I don't remember what it's called, but it's the one that like you have to sit still for. And upon mentioning this, Scott basically is like, so I can just dip or like do something to you or whatever. And so she like interrupts it and moves closer. Yeah, and it the interaction kind of ends. I don't remember exactly how it went, but yeah, it's, I mean, she just effectively finds out he's just kind of grumpy about being here, and you know, just I think she's kind of still suspicious a little bit in this moment. But one thing that really stuck out to me on this watch through is that Apo comes up and asked Martyn if Martyn is home to talk, and he lets her in. For people who do not watch as many POVs, Martyn does not let you into his house. Like, he just did. But, like, I paused the video. I was a little bit shocked for a moment. To be fair, before this, my, like, least watched POVs were, like, Martyn and Sausage are the ones I needed to catch up on. And so I hadn't seen that as much. I'd kind of skimmed around before, but, like, there's still a few that I'm a little weaker on. And I was just like, excuse me? What? Anyways. But, like, most everyone else, who is basically everyone else I had been consuming, gets no and get out, or he leaves the house to talk to them. So that was fun. I was like, whoa. And that for me is, like, I feel like if anyone in the town is the most paranoid besides Avid and, like, mistrustful, it's that combination, because I think Avid is more trusting than Martyn is, and he trusts Apo at least more than most people. Anyways, so Martyn during this conversation ends up telling Apo that he ate the book from this morning, and then the puff cloud potentially got Shelby and Scott, and Apo thinks that Shelby makes sense. At this point, cough cough, spoilers, I don't think Shelby is a vampire, because this is episode 2 still. So that was just like a sitting still kind of thing. But anyways, it's in this conversation that they decide to believe in vampires for, like, 2 days, while, like, looking for evidence and trying to figure out what's going on. And this genuinely bothers Apo for, like, a little bit. And it's just like, ugh. Like, it hurts her a little bit on the inside to, like, even just, like, try and think about it for a little bit. And then Apo mentions what had happened earlier with Avid and him being confused about the magic book, like, in the town, and says something that's really that I think was, that I also thought was good. It's, Avid's not messing with us, he's just crazy, and it implying that, like, hey, he's got the paranoid problem, but, like, he's not the one that's, like, sowing misinformation or whatever. This is legit. But yeah, one other thing to mention is this group sees Owen, Scott, and Shelby and Pyro run off to go fishing together. They actually, were, like, hiding behind the trees for a little bit, like, watching them. Owen does see them, and invites them to fish or whatever. But, like, this is something that happens during this like, chunk of time, is that Apo finds Shelby's faith in the supernatural frustrating. Like, like, visible annoyance is the term I would use to describe it. And that's another instance of, like, being not necessarily, like, mistrustful and suspicious of, like, the holy light or whatever, and like the churchy aspect to the good team or whatever. And I think that's really interesting. That Apo is, like, very much, like, not taking to it, because some people are, but I think so far from what I've seen, Apo is the most mistrustful of the, like, holy relic, whatever, like, terminology kind of situation. So, but yeah, they bump into Scott while looking for Martyn. They don't ever end up meeting back up until they get back to town. But Sausage and Apo are the ones who get the last beacon for the, like, when they have the, you got all the beacons, sanctified thingy. They get it, like, then they head back to town. And then when they're back in town, another iconic line from Apo, once they meet back up with Martyn, She says, "I thought rich people were supposed to be smart." Iconic. And then Martyn basically admits to having no survival skills whatsoever. And then Apo hits him with the, well, never go out by yourself ever again. Huge mama bear. Huge, like, nuh-uh. We ain't having that in this house. And it's, like, really sweet, but also, like... But, like, you know that, like, I care about you, but I'm, like, really grumpy that you're being, like, dangerous kind of energy, you know? Mama bear. They're heading towards the castle or whatever. They bump into Owen, who has a moment and won't go with them. But it's important to note that Apo, like, wishes for Owen's safety as he heads back. And, this is the moment when we, have, I don't know if Apo, like, actually saw. I think it was more so Martyn that caught it. But they do see the figure of someone, Scott, by the beacon. And, but yeah, no, Martyn says that blue is unmistakable. And then we have the like ending message of, "A vampire has broken through your holy defense." Like the message thing. And that was fun to end on. So episode 3. Another iconic line from, like, the summaries. Beautiful. So Apo says, "Rich boy, the gay romance novelist, and I have made a pact to believe in the supernatural for the next 48 hours. But the cadence of her voice when she's like, "Rich boy" and "the gay romance novelist," it's hilarious. And then another thing that she says is, "Man, those mushrooms in the forest are really strong, guys." Definitely. And I have in my little parentheses coping. Which I think is so funny. Apo be like, "Everyone must be eating the mushrooms. Like, that's gotta be it. Please." Yeah. And they, like, had camped out a beacon from the end of the session, and I know this is, like, a little bit of metagaming, but I love how it's incorporated into her character. She crafts a boat and is like, "I learned this from the military," and then rides the boat off the cliff. Fabulous. And then Martyn is talking about all the evidence that's sort of piling up. It was a lot of, like, anecdotes, but it was solid stuff. And then Apo hits us with, "I can't bear for Shelby and Avid to be right." Because, like, it's, like, hurting her soul a little bit to, like, hear this and have to, like, sort of agree with it. But yeah, they're on, like, the river by, like, the Pale Forest area. And they're talking about, like, who they think they can trust or can confide in, and the possibility of multiple vampires. And Sausage clocks that Scott has been hanging around Owen, Shelby, and Pyro. Vampires. And they're able to convince Apo to just be at least a little cautious of Pyro, and because roommates. And they decide to keep believing so long as there's, like, new evidence. Apo in this moment hasn't joined Team Vampire yet, but I will say, let's add social circles. But yeah, Apo refuses to is still not vampires, but does believe that there is some form of malicious intent going on. And then the interesting thing is, Sausage, who has just convinced Apo to be suspicious of her roommate, says that he doesn't believe Owen is suspicious or bad, even after giving the same argument. And I was just like, you have a blind spot. Yeah, and then Martyn tells Shelby about Scott, who Shelby at this point is a vampire. So that's fun. But, like, during this conversation, like, there's a lot of, like, shaking her head and, like, looking down. And something interesting that I've noticed is Apo would rather not tell people to, like, prevent worry. He's very concerned with, like, town sentiment. Peacekeeper, keep the peace. At pretty much all costs, as we shall see. Oh, my heart. And, but yeah, Apo is sus that Shelby would probably be the first person to go, having Scott as a roommate, and doesn't buy that she would be oblivious, which is correct. Well, partially correct. Correct that she's been gotten. Incorrect. She was kind of oblivious. She didn't kind of know it was coming, but went in and it happened. And Apo has gotten to the point where she's like, vampires must be real or we're all insane. And she can't decide if hiding it longer or sharing is like a better idea. And it's just generally just like kind of spiraling and not having a good time. And it kind of decides on like preferring to suppress the information, but is immediately hit with like Martyn making great arguments for informing people. And they kind of agree that they're gonna tell Cleo, Pearl, and Shelby. They've already told Shelby. Apo does agree that Cleo should be told. But yeah, Cleo in this conversation, when they go to talk to her, is suspicious of Owen because he's still on the nothing is happening train, which was her train. But even Cleo is like, no, there's some weird crap going on. Okay, this is not. There's issues. But yeah, Apo talks about like potentially leaving if there are vampires, but then pauses and said, but there's people here. Because she cares too much to actually do it. Oh. Big heart. But yeah. And then, oh no, I like paused the video so many times, the episode, like right after, because I remembered and I was like, wait a second, I know what happens. Because after the meeting, Owen and Apo go to fix the beacon that just got turned. And Apo is like sympathizing and is like very nice and kind with Owen. And Owen's like, yeah, well, you know, it sucked. And even like my parents weren't even that nice either. And Apo's being vulnerable and sharing things that she really just wanted to go somewhere quiet. And then Owen says the line, I thought you might be hungry, and I died on the inside. My emotional journey was so different because I watched Owen's POV first when this episode came out. It's I'm having feelings. I had many feelings. The feelings we're feeling, okay? It broke my heart. And then Apo's like really surprised and kind of betrayed that Pyro was a vampire. And oh, and she's hurting. And during this conversation, Apo's like, cut it, I know what you are, to Scott. Because she has all the pieces. She's heard so much, like, contextual information and things that, like, don't make sense and timelines that don't line up. And then the words come out of that come out of Apo's mouth are, Avid was right. And it hurts her so much. Oh. And she's feeling the danger. But she's like, I have someone to get back to. And it goes for the bargain. And the ultimatum of death. And she's shook. She's having a terrible time. And she's hating it. And she's like, I have to choose. And I don't want to hurt someone. Why am I choosing someone? And she's spiraling. Terrible. Because imagine being told that you could, like, you're forced into this, or you're forcing someone else into something you already don't want. And so why would they want it? And you're betraying them. And it's just like, understandably, Apo is an emotional wreck. And she goes to the beacon and she says, I don't want to lose the warmth. I don't want to lose her warmth. And I'm like crying at this point. I'm not crying, but like my soul is crying because it's. And in the town, it like, she can't be fully truthful in this moment. Like, she could, but in this time of fear and desperation, she goes to Shelby, who she knows will believe her, also is a vampire at this point, but she doesn't know that. And Shelby talks to her, and she's talking about, like, maybe they're not all bad, and you know, you work for the government and you're not evil, and you know, like, she's just trying to make her best argument, because essentially she's arguing for herself in this moment. And at this point, like, Apo's inner monologue is still anyone but me, anyone but her, and she really honestly considers spilling to the town what happens. And Apo won't do it. She chooses not to sacrifice anyone. She chooses to sacrifice herself and instead to go down swinging. She decides that, you know what, it'd be worth it if I can just, you know, it's my duty. I have to do something, even if I can only get, you know, one of them or two of them. And once she sees Scott, one of the coldest lines, I didn't think much of it. In Scott's POV, you're sitting there like, oh yeah, whatever, we're chilling, you know. The music is completely different. And Scott says, do you know how to kill a vampire? Which is such a cold line. Like, I did not feel this way the first time I watched this. And she kills Scott. And she goes to the castle to find other vampires. She's going through it. She's like, thinking, I killed someone. And then she kills Scott a second time. Because it didn't work the first time. And Scott is like, so far the only person killing people is you. And it's cool. Shook. The feelings. Everywhere in my body, coursing through my veins. And she's like, I guess I'll tell the town. And they talk for a little while. And And she's like, you know, how's that work for Avid? And she's like, are you gonna say, oh, I killed Scott several times and it didn't really work? That's not gonna go well. And he's talking, and one of the things that happens is Apo says, I'm just food. And that hurt me. That hurt me on the inside. And not but a few moments later, Apo says, okay, turn me, and relents. And the fact, and Scott says, are you sure? And she says, if it's not me, it's someone else. And I'm like, my soul is crying. And he turns her. And not seconds later, I counted, it was like 3 seconds, Ivan Adrift showed up. It didn't have to be this way. We were this close. And Apo mutes, and she's like, shoot. And she punches Pyro off the bridge. I didn't cry while I was watching this. I am crying now a little bit. Because it didn't have to happen. And then, you know, she's going back to town. She's spiraling. And she affirms to herself that she's not going to help the vampires. And she realizes, oh shoot, I'm gonna live forever. And she's worried about Cherry. And then barely has moments to herself before she freaks out because, you know, the little message that says new vampire. She freaks out and turns into a bat for the first time to check on, to see what happened. But she doesn't get all the way there. She finds Martyn on the shore of the river. And Martyn is shaken up and freaked out because canonically, technically he died, but not really, but you know. And he's just going through it. And he doesn't know that Apo is also going through it in this moment. But in this moment, Apo is focused on helping Martyn feel better and to try and make him feel a little bit better. And he doesn't know. He's feeling super guilty about, like, Cleo, and he's freaking out. And it hurt me to see Apo and Cleo, and Cleo says to Martyn, wow, your powers are so cool. That saved me. And you know it wasn't enough. And you know that he didn't save Cleo. And they're both lying to try and make him feel better. But, you know, it worked. He feels a little bit better, and he goes and he's shouting to the town about the 4 confirmed vampire. And this is when Apo finds out that you need a stake to kill a vampire. But, you know, like, Apo goes to leave the town and eats a potato on her way out, and it doesn't work. And it's just, and she's hurting. And she decides, you know what? I'll play spy. I'll lead the town to get rid of the vampires that they know about. And the pain, and when I tell you the pain and the devastation in Apo's voice when she says, you're a vampire too, about Cleo. And she's like, I'm not going to help you, and it's just, And then the vampires are checking to make sure nobody knows about Cleo or Apo, and she's kind of like moving to leave, But on her way out, this felt so much differently before, but Owen says, like, do you have any blood? Which sounds so bad, but the way that he says it, like, do you have any blood, is like the vampire equivalent of, like, have you eaten from a parent? But it's, like, so sad. And she's hurting and not having a good time, and, you know, reveals a little bit for her, you know, I got discharged, I don't do well with blood, to the other vampires, and is able to escape. And she gets back to the town, and she's still checking that everyone's safe, and then Apo kills the pigs in her house, and she almost kills Truffle, and is barely able to hold herself together, and decides to let Truffle go back into the forest, and says, Cleo, I tried to eat my pig, and then there's the keep it together from Cleo, and it's like, this is a tragedy. We were this close. I'm gonna have to write a fanfic about this or something, because we were so close. And it hurts. And I'm in pain. And this made me feel feelings. Apo is a lovely character. Apo has too big of a heart for her own good. She's too selfless. She cares too much. She feels responsible, and she's just... I can only hope that Apo is able to mediate or at least do some form of good, because she didn't deserve this. She didn't want this. She took it so that someone else wouldn't. But it felt like her sacrifice was spat on, because there were two. She didn't even stop it from happening one more time in this episode. It made it... It was beautiful and sad, and it didn't even help. It wasn't enough. And that's a tragedy. It's a crying shame. And it's beautiful. But all that to say, one more day.